Alrighty, so let's get the show on the road. Today we're gonna be talking about like the whole everything fucking wrong with like slowdown perks and just everything. I've made like a 5-6 page like little document here with like almost 1,000 words that I'm gonna be using as reference so I can get my information correct. And this is just the problem with DBD right now is the slowdown perks in it. Mainly two perks used in conjunction, but it's people using pop and ruin. It's a huge issue, and it gives like just an unnecessary game slowdown and map pressure that killers don't earn through skills, but they earn by just throwing on these perks. Ruin's been in the game since like literally right after Legacy came out. So December 2016 is when Hag was introduced to the game, is when Ruin was brought out. The perk got buffed after Legion came out, making it to where it affects all survivors at all tiers, which that's an okay buff because gens were still going fast around that time. 2018 and 2017 were still pretty tough killer years, but 2019 has definitely kind of been the turnaround, because I remember people used to always complain that Dead by Daylight was very survivor sided. Killers didn't have any power, any pressure, or nothing. But I always saw like good killer mains still doing good, and those same killer mains still do really good today. So I don't necessarily understand why in particular we're seeing a rise in pop and ruin. You've always seen ruin back in like 2018, 2017, but now you're really starting to see this pop becoming a main thing as well. You're seeing this as a major issue. Now pop's been in the game since 2018, and for the most part it's stayed the same. At tier 3 it's 25%, but for some reason in the 3.0 update they buffed it. I don't see why, because I feel like the perk was really strong at tier 3 as well. For 30 seconds you could find a gen easily within 30 seconds, but they decided to buff it so that the base value of it is 25%, and the timer goes up to 60 seconds now with a base timer of 40. So it is completely buffed. You don't even need like any, in my opinion, anything past tier 1 pop for it to be very effective, and people tend to run pop and ruin together, which like I mentioned before, it gives huge slowdown that the killer doesn't earn other than throwing on two perks. So we're going to scroll down because there are other slowdown perks in the game, which personally I don't really have too much an issue of, but it's just people stacking perks. You have Corrupt, which is a very good perk. It's good on Trapper and killers that have to set up. I use it on my Bubba. I love it on my Bubba. I use it over Ruin. I would never combine Corrupt and Ruin. I know a lot of people do, but it's just not something I would do because it's just overkill. Like stacking slowdown perks is very overkill for how the game is. Before 2016, 2017, people stacked slowdown perks because the maps were really, really strong for survivors, and perks were also really strong for survivors, especially with how exhaustion used to work and how healing used to work and everything. It was way more survivor sided than it is now. But the game, how it is now, I want to say it's past the equilibrium of balance. I feel like it's definitely swaying more killer sided, and I understand that a lot of people feel this game should be killer sided. The problem with that, in other games where we see this motif where the killer is very strong, and they can just down you and kill you and you're out of the game, you have to play immersed and just do the objective. But those games also don't do as well as Dead by Daylight, because Dead by Daylight has one really fun mechanic that you can interact with the killer with multiple times in one game, and that's the chase mechanic. The chase mechanic is really what makes DBD unique, in the structures as well. It makes the game really fun for survivors when you can get into a chase with the killer and interact with the killer, and it's fun as killer to chase a survivor. And it's good to learn mind games. It's the most fun part of the game. And as the state is right now, if you're a good killer, you can end a chase relatively quickly on just about any map, especially with some nerfs that have happened to Survivor. Some other slowdown perks, sorry about that tangent, involve Thanatophobia and Dying Light. A lot of people tend to stack like Ruin and Thanatophobia, and Pop sometimes like that, or Thanatophobia, Dying Light, Ruin, or Ruin, Dying Light, and it slows down the game a lot, and I don't understand why it is necessarily needed. Personally, I don't see it needed. It definitely feels overkill, because I was just watching my friend on stream while writing up the script play some killer, and all he's running is Ruin, and he's getting 3 people down, having like almost 9 hooks at 4 gens. Like, it's not anything crazy, and he's like almost red ranks. And I have another friend of mine named Funneral who plays Billy with no add-ons and only runs Shadowborn and Barbecue, like with only 2 perks, no slowdown perks. I want to say he 4Ks more often than not. And he plays against some people with brains, but it's just having the skill as Killer, Killer is very strong if you have that skill, and you don't need these slowdown perks at all. Dying Light got reworked, and I actually like the rework a lot more. It stops people from just like instantly mooring their obsession and having the permanent slowdown game, so it actually encourage you to keep your obsession alive, which can kind of bore the game, because if you're the obsession, the killer's not going to want to chase you, etc., because they want to get their Dying Light value. Thanatophobia got buffed for some reason by 1%. It's not a major buff, but it was still a buff that was just kind of confusing as to why it was needed to be done. And then we're going to talk about Freddy as well, because he incorporates into this problem with slowdown with the fact that he actually has add-ons that slow down the game as well. So people will not only stack Ruin, Thanatophobia, Pop, but then they'll stack Swing Chains and Jump Rope, and they'll just make this ungodly, just slow game. And it's terrible. It's so slow, and it's just not fun to play against. But slowdown in general is just an issue because there's just been a lot of nerfs in the past year, I want to say, with gen speed and map nerfs and whatever. And like maps have, like, the structures have been getting nerfed, and they've been removing a lot of stuff, and even nerfing perks that instead of rebalancing the maps, they'd much rather nerf perks, which I don't think is a smart thing at all. But some common complaints that I've been getting, like especially when I talk about this issue, is I actually got today, which I was told that what I said is like, it said this is all and well and good until you come against a 16 meta perk 4-man gen rushers or whatever, is that you need all these slowdown perks unless you're playing Spear and Nurse, which are 2 of the strongest killers in the game, which you don't need these perks, and you don't even need to play those killers, as is stated later on by this guy, because he says anyone who's smart can 4K 90% of the time with any killer. So it doesn't even matter if you play those strong killers. Then it makes sense, right, that you don't even need those slowdown perks, because he says that he only uses them to defend himself. He just wants to get a 12 hook every game. So he runs 2 gen slow perks. And he just essentially kind of nullified his argument by saying if you're smart, you don't need it, and you can 4K 90% of the time with any killer. So then it's really going against him saying he's not smart and that he uses 2 gen slowdown perks because he needs that help. Because my original post was saying that if you need to run these slowdown perks to play killer, then you might want to, you might want to practice killer more, because this isn't how you should, learn. You should actually try and develop the skill in the game and not have to rely on a perk. Like Survivor mains who just rely on balance landing and just running shit buildings, you're not learning anything. You're just literally running a perk so you can bounce, hit the ground, and run really fast. And, Sprint Burst for when you're caught out in bad situations. Sometimes if you're caught in a dead zone, you should get hit, and then you can get the safety and loop there just fine injured, and then go down eventually. But, I responded and I said that there's hours of Twitch footage that shows that you don't have to run those perks. And, you'll have a better match. Like, personally, when I know I'm playing against a good killer who's not running these perks, and, we all lose to them and we get outskilled by them, that, I feel better knowing that I actually played against someone else who has skill in this game and who is in the upper tiers of DBD players. And I can enjoy the fact knowing that, I have more improvement to get so I can play against this person again and have a better match. And then they respond saying, feel free to watch any tournament footage to see survivors are absolutely the power play, and if survivors play optimal, killers can do next to nothing. Shrug. And I said that, I don't even think that, 0.1% of any of their games or games that they will play or have played have been near tournament level. And I said this statement's irrelevant because this topic is discussing casual play. Because I'm not a no tournament player. I'm not part of Team ID. I'm not part of Marth's fucking DPIP squad. I'm not part of that. I'm not in a tournament squad. I play the game casually and for fun, But I told this guy if he feels like he goes against tournament level squads, and I have bad news for him, because if you feel like every 4-man Swift or whatever is a tournament squad, then, there is something definitely wrong with you. I mean, 4 friends on, comms is one of the more powerful things in this game, but not everyone on comms is just trying to, sweat really hard and outplayed the killer in that manner. They're really just trying to play with friends and have fun and discuss and joke around. You're playing a game, so obviously communication is going to happen. It's just like, oh, hey, where are you? Are you getting this gen? Have you gotten chest here? Oh, where's the killer? Oh, he's with me over by Shaq. Or he's like, oh, he's going towards you guys. But like, you usually by the time you hear that information, you're within heartbeat range, and he's going to start a chase with someone. So nonetheless, that information is almost nullified. But then again, there are some sweaty people who do play like that, and I can understand that. Like, I understand that it is, something that people fear, but I don't understand really why, because sometimes you just have to accept losing. And it's just, like, especially if I'm playing killer and I come up against a pretty coordinated group and I'm just playing bad, then I have to accept the fact that, I played bad. Most killer mains do. They accept the fact that, they played bad, or it was an unlucky map or whatever, because this game is very RNG based, which is why you couldn't even balance it towards the top tier play, because this game has so much RNG and luck in it. You really just couldn't, and this game wouldn't do good as a competitive esport like Counter-Strike or League or Overwatch or whatever, because you can actually balance individual elements. The maps are very well polished, etc., etc. Nothing changes without it. The main balancing point is the skill between the players and the interactions and the plays that are made. They brought up Survivor meta perks, so I'll list, in my opinion, the main meta perks, the ones you see most often, the ones that are strong, that you'll see among strong players, which is Adrenaline, Sprint Burst, Borrowed Time, Decisive, Dead Hard, Iron Will, Unbreakable. I took out Balance Landing since the nerf. There's really no point in running Balance Landing. It's been heavily nerfed, and Balance Landing, honestly, I wouldn't mind it getting nerfed, but I'd much rather keep the stagger reduction and just not have the Sprint Burst. But I'm gonna go over a few counters for these perks, or at least one main counter I could think of. With Adrenaline, it's easily countered. It's a wasted perk slot if you just end the game before end game starts, or you find the last survivor before you close the hatch, etc., etc. Or you have everyone down, hook everybody, and then hook the last survivor and then close hatch. I mean, Adrenaline is kind of a wasted perk if you are a good killer who ends the games fast. And if you don't do that, let's say you down someone, you pick them up, gens pop, you can just Adrenaline tech them, and other than that, you just have to chase him down to hit him. And usually by the end of the game, with how DBD is right now, you can probably down someone pretty easily if you keep pressure on the doors and if you get a good door spawn. But again, like the RNG, I feel like the RNG of the maps in the game shouldn't be dependent on what perks you run, though, because people, maybe they'll just get an unlucky map and they feel like survivors are overpowered, but it's really just the RNG of the map that screwed them over, not even the survivors at all. Borrowed Time is another one, but it's countered by not being interrogated to the hook when the survivor's getting unhooked. Playing Freddy, which is more the joke of that counter, or just chasing after the person who unhooked. I know the person who just got unhooked will try and take a hit. If you want to, you can hit them and activate the Borrowed Time. That makes them waste 16, or actually, I don't know, is it 16 seconds? It makes them waste their time having to mend, so they're not doing gens. Especially right now, even if you stay in terror radius, your bar will go down unless you're running. So they're forced to mend, and then you can just go down the person who unhooked them, and you're all good. Decisive Strike, which is countered just by slugging the survivor for 60 seconds max. It's not hard to slug someone on the ground. I'm not going to name any names. Actually, I'm not even going to do that whole joke I was about to do, but all you have to do is just slug someone. You can literally just say, hey, Alexa, set a timer for 60 seconds.
1 minute, starting now.
Done. So it's not hard. If you really care about not getting Decisive Strike, you can play around it very, very simply. You shouldn't have to worry about that. Dead Hard is countered just by bumping into the survivor. That's what I do to get them to activate. Is I literally just bump into their model, and then, because if they're really waiting to use their Dead Hard, then I'll just bump into them. They'll use it, and then I'll hit them. It's just that simple. Unless Dead Hard's used for distance, and then you just kind of treat it like you treat Sprint Burst, which I accidentally clearly skipped over. Which is just, you just keep chasing them. Sprint Burst, as long as you don't fall for the bait, which is where survivors are walking and they Sprint Burst away when you swing for them, you can usually just catch up to them pretty quickly. Iron Will, which is another good survivor perk, is countered just by listening for grass and following the blood of the survivor. It's not too hard to counter. And then Unbreakable, which I feel is one of the only perks that's on this list that can't be countered while still like actively putting out map pressure, because You know, I feel one of the only counters for it, unless someone's looping you around the down survivor and they're dumb with their unbreakable and just stand up in your face and you just hit them. One of the other ways you would have to counter that is to just stand over their body. But again, you know, they can just sit there and wait for it to be 9. It's just wasting time. So for the most part, unbreakable isn't counterable. So I can understand unbreakable people complaining about that one, because I mean, it's just like, because you can have a 4-man slug and then one person unbreakable picks up the other 2 people and then unhooks and boom, you just lost all that. So I can understand. And I want to say this for a general rule, is that killer perks are generally stronger than survivor perks. So even if survivors have unbreakable, which is a really strong perk, killers still have way stronger perks. I went through and I counted a list of perks, you know, a list of perks I found, and I found like 48 of them to be mostly useful perks that, you know, would actually come in handy in a game. I counted 48, and I've only listed 7 meta survivor perks. That's the thing, is like, no, these, you know, there's not 48 meta killer perks, but there's hardly more than these 7 survivor perks that are actually useful. Some useful survivor perks I didn't put on here is probably Bond, Prove Thyself, Empathy, By Any Means Necessary, Inner Strength. Like, those perks are definitely useful. They aren't going to be meta. Like, they're not going to come into, you know, use every single game. But there are 48 killer perks that 100% could be used every game. Killers do have metas as well, you know, which is why this whole video is kind of centered around the issue of stacking slowdown perks and pop ruin for the most part. Sorry about that short interruption. I had to go get some water. My throat's a little dry. So, you know, killers have these metas as well. I already mentioned this before, but some people believe that killers should be more powerful. But like I said, look at the games where the killers are really powerful. Like, those games haven't done as well as Dead by Daylight. And the chase mechanic and the fact that the game is kind of, it feels like it's trying to push to be an equilibrium to where the game is actually like balanced. Like, the 4 survivors should be as strong as 1 killer. So essentially it comes down to who plays better. And for survivors, it comes to the teamwork of the team. I mean, that's the thing as well. Is, speaking of that chase mechanic, is the issue with chase is that maps have been dumbed down a lot. With how powerful killers are now, there's hardly any structures that like can waste a killer's time, can like really waste their time. Before I continue this video, I want to preface that I'm talking about jungle gyms such as like long wall, short wall, LT, and then like the seat wall pallets. I just want to do this just in case there's anybody who thought I was just talking about like, oh, like Ironworks doesn't exist or Rancid Abattoir doesn't exist or anything like that. But I wanted to make sure that people knew that I'm talking about jungle gyms. I didn't exactly mention it, but it's what was on my mind when I wrote up the script and what I was thinking of when I was recording this. But I didn't preface that until I think a little bit later, I'm sure, because I mentioned that there are buildings that are, you know, like really bad. I just didn't mention that I wasn't talking about any of those really strong structures in this section, and I was just mainly focusing on jungle gyms. There's like very little structures that can like really do that now, especially after double pallets have been removed, vacuum pallets, etc. Because how I feel right now is that the game plays out as you either have to waste this structure or die keeping it up. So you're either going to have no pallets or whatever in the end game, but you stay alive, or you can go down and die and keep this structure for the end game, but then you might not get that, because if you're sitting there trying to save pallets and you're going down, you're just giving the killer hooks. You have 3 hooks and you're dead. So if you die, then you're slowing down your team's progress, which is where you have to find a balance for that, but it's still really hard, especially with how dedicated service hits or whatever. So sometimes it doesn't even matter if you drop a pallet, you just waste the pallet because you got hit through it anyway. And I understand it, you know, I don't mean for maps to go back to how they used to be. They used to be terrible. Like I said, with double pallets, vacuum pallets, you could vacuum vaults, which was also really crazy. During that time, multiple slowdown perks was way more acceptable, and you did see a lot of slowdown perks. You saw Thanatophobia and Ruin during that time a lot. You can go back, hardly people complained about Ruin on Billy. You know, that's, you know, a lot of people weren't too great with Billy anyway, so they didn't really see it. But as they've seen, like, as players get more skillful, you'll see that they get way better. And now Ruin is more frowned upon on Billy. You don't need pop Ruin on Billy. You really don't, because of his map. Like, or his map pressure and his chase potential is so good, you don't need that on him. But like with how maps used to be, they used to be terrible. They used to be so bad, especially with like old sprint burst and, you know, old healing. It was really hard to keep pressure in the game, but you still see killers like Otofu and Scott Jund were doing just fine, mainly because the skill of survivors wasn't as great. But I mean, obviously, everyone gets better at the game as time improves. That's kind of how that works. You learn how to run something. You learn different. You learn the game more, so you'll naturally be better at the game. As it stands in 2019, or at least as of right now, as it stands, it feels like unless the survivors do get that strong setup, the killer can end chases fast. Killer can keep up map pressure easily. As long as they have the skill in the chases and it's not too hard. What you want to do is you want to just have a bunch of friends who are good at the game going to kill your friends and just chase them around to see how they play, and just learning how to read players. As soon as you learn how to read a player, it's easy to chase with them because you know how they play, you know their mind games, whatever, and you can still end chases fast, unless, like I said, you were to get an unlucky map generation, which was really powerful survivors, or if you got like Haddonfield with old Balanced Landing. But I mean, the Pop Ruin meta, or stacking gen slowdown perks, like I said, it gives that map pressure that isn't earned. It's not earned through skill, it's earned by perks. And what's even more annoying is that people who run that, they also tend to just proxy hook, so they force out downs. They'll down the unhooker, slug them, and then go down the person who just got unhooked. So you have two slugs, and that slows the game down even more, and it's way more boring. Like I could understand that kind of play if you're down to like 1 or 2 gens, but when you're at 5 gens and you're just proxying hooks and forcing bad trades and punishing altruism, you're just kind of playing like an asshole. Like, this isn't, nobody in the game is trying to play like a tournament. We're all just trying to have fun, and I don't see how that's fun for the killer, because you're not interacting with the survivors other than that first chase where you down the guy and hook them, and then when you're just forcing bad trades, you're not interacting any other way besides that. Like, I feel like you can't combat a killer that's playing shitty when they're running all these slowdown perks. They're just proxying hooks, and you're just not having fun. Like, I guess the way you're supposed to play against that is to just do gens. But if everyone on your team, if someone's hooked, what are you gonna you just let that guy die? Like, there's no point to that. It's just stupid, because a person will die on hook faster than a gen will get done. For the most part, if they have Pop, Ruin, Thanatophobia, Dying Light, whatever, if they're stacking these slowdown perks, the person on hook is going to die way faster than then you'll get a gen done. So it's just not fun to play against a survivor. And, you just can't combat this in any way unless you have 4 people bring brand new parts. But, like, again, that's not fun at all, because if you get a kill, because you can't see who your killer is, if you get a killer that, is not running this or whatever, then that's unfair to them that they're just getting this really toxic sweat squad to play against. I mean, I'd love to see the killer I'm against in the lobby, which is why I liked peer-to-peer. I could just run MLGA. I'd be like, oh, I know this guy. This guy's a nice guy. I'll throw him a bloody party streamer, and I won't play like a dick. Or like, oh, this guy literally tunnels us down, runs this shit build, and Mori's us all a first hook. I'm just like, well, this guy's not going to have a fun match because he never gives us a fun match. I hate to see the game in the state that it is right now, and I'd much rather just see the game, more fun for both sides, and you don't have to worry about killer running Pop Ruin. I don't mind a killer running Ruin. Some killers need Ruin, but combining just slowdown perks, I think Ruin and Corrupt are probably the best, because they do the most. Ruin is really good if you can't find the totem, because searching for the totem wastes survivors time. Corrupt is really good as well because it doesn't disappear in the first 15 seconds of the match. It's just, there's so many good slowdown perks that are good on their own, and then you can focus on chase perks rather than just maxing slowdown perks and then just not even chasing anybody. There's more skill in the chases than there is in just proxying and just kicking gens. And that's really what my main takeaway from this is just that stacking slowdown perks just isn't fun, and it doesn't promote skillful gameplay. And I really hope that the devs take a look at it and kind of understand that the fun of both sides is important, and that they should find a workaround so that killers can have fun without having, or can, play the game or feel like they can play the game without running slowdown perks, and survivors, don't have to worry about killers running these shitty perk builds that are just going to be so unfun. It's like, why am I even playing Dead by Daylight? I honestly don't even find myself playing it too much often, especially solo queue. I used to always solo queue, used to have a lot of fun solo queuing, but I don't do that anymore. But that's all I have to say on this topic. I didn't expect this to be that wordy or whatever, but yeah, I went really in depth and I tried to explain everything to the best of my abilities. I hope you guys, I hope you guys learned something from this or whatever, and I hope You guys, if you like to discuss, I'd like to have a civil discussion in the comments. I don't want anything like, oh, salty survivor, bullshit, whatever is just gonna get deleted. I want to be like, hey, I see what you're saying. Here's what I think. I want to have an actual intelligent adult conversation with people. If you do want to comment on this, or if you agree with me, don't try and be extremist like, yeah, fuck killers, whatever. Like, no, I want actual intelligent conversations. I don't want to have people just fucking throwing shit at each other like monkeys. We're fucking civilized people, so we should act like it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.